How's it going? I heard something this week I thought was interesting. It said that there are so many times in the Bible when God would get ready to tell people something, and before he would just come out and say it, he would get their attention first. It was almost, how many of you guys remember when you were younger, your mom going, guys? Or like your teacher in school, like flip the lights, what? And then they'd tell you what they're going to tell you. And think of like Moses in the burning bush. It got the attention of Moses first. I love that that's what worship does in a service. We walk in and we carry in so many life experiences, and so much of life is not, it's a distraction, right? And so you walk in. I would love to be one of those people that just walks into church like, I'm ready. It usually takes me a minute. And so I'm appreciative, just in my own life, I'm appreciative of what worship does, what God allows there to be sort of a buffer, because I think God's going to challenge you this morning, and I think I get to play a part in that. So I'm excited about what I'm going to get to preach about, but I also know that this is probably some people's last day at this church. So I'm getting older, and now listen, if you're going to get all judgy and be like, you're not that old. I know. I mean, look at me. I've said it before, I'm at a weird age where, from a church perspective, everybody's like, oh, you're just so young and joyful and full of life. And then all my rodeo buddies are like, ugh, dude, you're so old. I'm a weird age. I feel more like I'm getting older because this is as old as I've ever been. It's changing me, I will admit, it's changing me in ways I wasn't ready for. And I'm going to share an example of that because it goes along with what we're going to talk about. I thought that as I got older, I would change in a certain way, and like I would maybe mature or improve, and I was excited that maybe gray hair would make me look better, or all these ideas when you're young. It's not changing me in positive ways. Here's what happened this week. It wasn't quite bedtime for the kids, but I still wanted ice cream. We were close enough to bedtime that they didn't need ice cream, because then they wouldn't go to bed. And so I was in this predicament of like, well, I don't want to just take out ice cream in front of, this is aging, young people. This is what it looks like. So I did what any self-respecting father would do. I left it in the little plastic bag in the carton, and I went to my room, and I shut the door, and I went to my bathroom, and I locked the door, and I sat this week in my bathroom eating ice cream alone. And the reason I did that is because I don't want to argue. I don't want to have, the energy that it takes to argue with my kids who literally are like, can I have some? Can I have some? Please, can I have some? I don't want to deal with it. So I sat like a shameful cowardice hypocrite in my bathroom. I feel better getting that off my chest. But avoidance in general is something that's new. It's something I've kind of grown into. And I think when I was a young person, avoidance wasn't something I even appreciated in someone. Like if someone ever avoided conflict, I'm like, you're weak. Because I was young and I thought I knew everything. And to see that in my own home, I'm even allowing some of it was a surprise to me. I'll get back to that. Mark chapter 12, verse 38 says this. It says, as he taught, Jesus said, watch out for the teachers of the law. Isn't that interesting? That Jesus, because the idea, we talked about it last week, is that Jesus is the creator of the worst religion ever. It breaks every single religious rule. It goes into opposition to what we're taught is important for religion. It's not based on your earning your way in through behavior. It's not based on how much you give and how much you get. It's like the worst religion ever. At a glance, you would think, Jesus, we love you, but this just isn't going to work ever. This is never going to take off. This is a terrible business model. Don't you just love that if we're not going to try to create a religion here, that if we're just trying to get a better glimpse of Jesus, that's what we're doing. We just want to understand who Jesus was better. We want to see who he was, because if we can see who Jesus was, maybe we'll get a better glimpse of who we are, and life becomes healthier, and you become healthier, and you're less, attached to your circumstances. I mean, we got this whole goal in mind. So when Jesus says something that goes right along with what we already think, it's great. We love it. How Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he's like, hey guys, check out the teachers of the law. And they're thinking, where's this going? Because the Pharisees, they were wealthy and they were important. And Jesus says they like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplace. Everybody ever know anybody like this? Flowing robes, they like to be greeted. I'm not, okay. I have one sermon's worth of filters that have already fallen off already this morning, so I'm being very careful. And have most important seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. And then he says this, these men will be punished most severely. Oh, we love that. I mean, I know we're very holy and we would never think anything less than what Jesus expected out of us. But if we're being honest, when Jesus is like, ugh, we're like, right? Oh, they're the worst. Pharisees. Oh, let me guess, they're rich. Oh, they're successful. Oh, they love being important. There's nothing that a society loves to hate more than self-righteous, powerful people. Powerful, self-righteous. It just scratches an itch. When Jesus is like, they're going to be punished. Don't you know that deep down they're like, okay, Jesus. But deep down they're like, yes. We love it. We love it. We love the idea of a Jesus that will take our side. And the idea is that we want to get a better glimpse of Jesus. So when we see him and he aligns to us, we love it. The very next verse, he no more gets the words out of his mouth. The very next verse, in verse 41, says this. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Everybody just took a deep breath, didn't you? Jesus is watching as people brought an offering to the temple. Not to the temple, more specifically to the temple treasury. Remember, we love when Jesus aligns with us. We love, yay, Jesus, because Jesus is going to take down the powerful. Yes. And he's watching as the offering is brought to the temple treasury and says, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she gave out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. If you're sitting there thinking, I don't like that story, it's okay. No one does. I have heard the most compelling preachers, the most beautiful public speakers that I've ever heard give wonderful sermons about this story, about the woman and the copper coins, and I've heard it. I've heard it all. I'm a 3rd generation at this. I've been at this for a while. I still hate this story. I hate it for 2 reasons, and maybe you'll understand. I hate it because it's been used to prod people into predatory giving. Have you ever known anybody? I know someone, he says, I don't give to the church, and here's why. His grandma had signed up for something she saw on TV, and she didn't mean to hit the button that she pushed or whatever, and they had put it on continually giving. Anybody ever heard stories like this? There was a ministry that she trusted, and so the ministry that she trusted that was going to give her something or do something, or like they were going to give her, how about this? How about this? If you give $1, he'll give you 10. We love that. It's been used to create a predatory religion, this story. And the idea is that we're not trying to build a religion, we're trying to see Jesus. But the second thing, and this is probably honestly the more accurate, we could never do that. Listen, how many of us could give the very last of what we have? It's impossible. I don't like it because she did something I don't think I could do. That's what really bothers me about it, is here's this lady that is a poor widow doing something that would challenge me so much that I'm like, oh man, I don't like being reminded of something that someone, how many of you guys don't like seeing someone do something better than you? This is that. It's like Jesus reverses his course in the middle of this story. And this is the Northwest, and wrestling, I realized I learned when I moved up here, wrestling is like a big part of the culture. We didn't wrestle much. I didn't wrestle growing up, so I'm very easily beaten up. But that's why I don't pick fights up here. And so one of the things I know about wrestling is if you can get someone to lean a certain way, and then you take that momentum of the way that they're leaning and you reverse it, okay? And you're like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. I know, I didn't. Okay, just bear with me. It's like that's what Jesus does here. He starts with, look at those Pharisees. And we're like, yeah, how about those guys? Oh, look how powerful they are and how self-righteous they are. They're the worst. And we're like, Jesus, you're the Son of God. So I mean, you being the Son of God, if you say it, I guess we have to agree with it because you're Jesus. See, we can so easily go, oh, it's Jesus, it's the Son of God. Oh, this is great, amazing. I love what he's saying. And then it's like he reverses and shows us a poor widow putting all she has into the offering at the temple, and it doesn't indicate that the temple was broke, does it? It doesn't say that the temple was going under. This is why I said this is some of you's last service here. I'll miss you. I love you. I hope you come back, but there's just, statistically speaking, these are the sermons where people are like, that's it. I guarantee this is someone's last week. I don't make very many guarantees, but I guarantee someone will leave. And when they leave this week, and I hope it's not you, please don't let it be you. Let it be someone else. And someone asks them, or, more likely when nobody asks them at all, they will say this. Oh, that church just wants your money. It's just all about money. I just can't listen to money. We talk about money less at this church than any church I've ever been to. And here's how I know that it will come. That when we do mention it, people are like, oh, that's it. It's all they want. So I realize I'm walking all over landmines. I've just come to terms with it. So I hope it's not you. Let it be someone else. But Jesus tells these stories back to back on purpose. And the reason he tells these stories back to back on purpose is that these are sister stories. These are stories that are related. They actually, here's the problem. They seem so different, don't they? The Pharisees and the poor widow. They seem very different. They seem at a glance like they couldn't be more different. But in reality, both stories tweak the exact same religious wiring. See, as people, we're all given this religious wiring. And you're like, well, I'm not religious. That's a religion. I believe in karma, do good things come back. That's religion. Like, that's just how religion works, is that I do more and I get more. I'm better, so I deserve better. I mean, all these things that as people that we say, that's why Jesus is so important, is that Jesus was so anti-religion. But as people, we have this in our sin nature comes pre-wired with religious wiring. And Jesus recognizes that in this story, he can tweak both edges of our religious system. Something about this story, there's going to be something about this story you don't like. Pharisees are the easiest. They're everything we love to hate. The Pharisees are everything that as a society we can pick on. They're powerful. They don't need us. They're unimportant to us because they think they're so important, all this stuff. But the widow, this is hard because the widow was giving into the temple treasury. How many of you guys would have felt good? Don't raise your hand. How many of you guys would have felt better if Jesus just marched over there and was like, listen, you need it worse than the temple needs it. You keep that. We'd be like, what a hero. But he didn't. And I want to know why. I don't want to be predatory. I don't want to turn this sermon into a religion. I will not. I absolutely will not. But the truth is, if I want to see Jesus, I want to see all of Jesus, even when he does or says something that I disagree with or don't understand. Is that at least a fair assessment for this morning? Jesus, what are you doing? Tell that poor lady to keep her copper coins. She needs them worse than the temple. See, but that's religion. We got to understand it. We got to understand how it's both. See, if we said, oh, the Pharisees, they need knocked down a peg, everybody would like that. And if we said, well, she needs it worse than the temple, we would all like that. But here's the problem. That both stories are pointing to the same problem. Both stories point to the exact same problem. The core thread, if you're going to be a religious person, first of all, this church is going to drive you bananas. We just aren't very good at it. The core thread of religion is self. Have you ever known someone who's like, is the camera rolling? Got the camera? Okay. Hey, I'm giving this poor person $5. Is there anything more disgusting? That is not giving to the poor. What that is you're buying an image for $5. You want to be seen doing something good. Hey, everybody, look at me. I'm doing something. Stop it. If that's you, if you do something nice for somebody less fortunate than you, shut up. Do it. By all means, do it. Shut up about it. Put the cameras away. Put the phone away. Just put it away. The religious core is self. That means that in religion, you can do good things so long as it benefits self in the end. This is going to be hard to hear, but it's harder to preach because I realize I don't even read my emails if it saves you some time writing an angry email. I'm not going to read it. The core of religion is self, and we're okay with doing good things as long as it reflects well on self. But the problem is Jesus only asked us for one thing. What did Jesus ask us for? Self. That's it. I just want self. I don't need anything else. I made you for a purpose. I made you for a plan. I've got great things I want to do through your life. I want to be relational. I want to know you, but it takes you to be involved. And religion goes, you can have everything else. Can I say that again? Religion will tell you, Jesus, you can have it all. You can have my songs. You can have my church attendance. You can have my Sunday outfits. You can have my big hair, my blue eyeshadow. I'm from the South. I don't know if you're picking up on that. I didn't expect to say blue eyeshadow this morning. Anyway. Religion says, you can have everything else, just not me. And Jesus goes, I don't want anything else, just you. See how they're so and so here's my newfound avoidance. Here's the Jordan eating ice cream in the bathroom, is that when we started this church, we were young. I was a young guy. I was an idiot. I don't know why anybody came to this church. I was literally wrong about everything. I had plans. I was never more confident than when I knew the least. It's typical, I think, that the most confident tend to be the least informed. But anyway. I was so brave. I prided myself on it. I would preach about anything. I didn't care. If it was in the Word, I was going to preach it. And I was so brave. And I wasn't brave. Turns out I wasn't brave at all. I was insignificant, and no one cared. There's a difference. Like, you can preach anything you want as long as you're little and you're not threatening and you're just a little baby church and you're just a little baby family and you're not really, making an impact. And people are like, say whatever you want to say, little guy. Go for you. Good for you. I thought I was brave. I wasn't. I was just very unimportant. And I was really proud of the fact that I didn't take a salary for the first 2 years. I was just going to do it because it was the right thing. And I lived with my in-laws. And I was fine with people knowing that. And it's funny because I see it differently now. At the time, I was really proud of it, but I see it differently. I see it for what it was, is that I was determined and this I would still hold to. I was determined that money was never going to play a role in the vision of the church. Even from the beginning, money would never play a role. I had been to so many churches where money got brought up so much that it flavored everything that happened. Big churches and little churches, no one's safe. Like, if you're a part of a church, you're always aware that there's a money thing somewhere, and if you can't see it, you know it's there, and you're always afraid that the money talk is going to pounce on you. I'm like, not here. We are not going to do it. This is not going to be a church that's shaped by money. I will say, I still agree with that. For the record, I'm 100%. I believe that 100%. But here's what I didn't understand, is that even the most religious people at our church were still giving. Now, hang on a second. I could pave the road from here to heaven with gold on the promises people made us when we were a little bitty church. When we were at Rimrock, and I was a little guy, and I was living with my in-laws, and I was broke all the time, and we hadn't done anything, and people were like, don't you worry, little buddy, we're going to help you out. You know how I can almost guarantee someone's not going to do something? They tell you they're going to do it first. It's probably just a good lesson in life, like in general. Take that with. If someone tells you all the big things they're going to do, that's pretty much a guarantee of all the things they'll never do. Even the most religious people would give. And so I took that as like, see, you don't talk about money. Money comes in, doesn't even need to be discussed. I was so proud of myself because, again, I wasn't brave. I wasn't a threat. So I stopped talking about giving. I never talked about giving. We don't really bring up giving. Anytime we do bring up giving, people leave, and then we get emails that I definitely read. So I just kind of let it fall off the radar. And here's my confession, and this is a confession. It's not pretend. My confession is the church is built, and the property is beautiful and it's awesome, and the cattle program's doing well, and you guys know, look around. We are not who we used to be. Things are going really well for what we hoped. This is way bigger than what we thought it would be. We've accomplished way more than we thought we would accomplish. And here's my admission, is that I kind of sunk back on some things that are important to the culture of Christ following. Bear with me. Please try to hear me. If you're going to get offended and decide this is your last week at church, this is when it's going to happen. Right about here. We actually had a family leave last service. If you have to go to the bathroom, don't. Just hold on. I would rather you have a public embarrassing incident than leave for the next 5 minutes. Just hang on. My ego can't take it. We live in a very generous culture. If you live in Powell, Butte, you know generous people. We are a generous culture. And if someone has a need, everybody jumps in. We are a phenomenal culture at giving when there's a need. Would you agree or disagree? Everybody agrees. But here's the problem, is that that's only half of it. That's only the half of the concept of generosity. When you're willing to be big and give to little, that's awesome. That's phenomenal. That's great. Like, that's a great function because, like I said, generosity should be a defining character of those who claim to follow Jesus. But if you have to be big to give to little, you've only gotten half of the concept. How many times do you hear people say this? I can't wait till I'm going to be successful and I'm going to be rich and then I'm going to give so much. Oh, we're all stupid. We think that's why. We think that's why you want to be rich, so you can give so much. We've been told that giving is when you're bigger and you give to littler and you can be a big impact. You can give and make a big impact. You can show up when someone's really suffering and really jump in and help them, and we're all going to get, which is great. Listen, it's phenomenal, but it's not complete. Giving and generosity should be a defining value of those who follow Christ. That means this: when we progress, when we as a church progress, we have to make sure that we are updating our why. Pause for effect. We have to update our why. Because if the only reason why we would give is if there's a need of something specific, it's good, but it's not complete. Because here's the problem. The church has outgrown being a broke little startup, maybe not young baby, which is good. We have now moved into a season where we have to reevaluate the concept of giving. You don't like hearing it, but I don't like preaching it, so I don't feel sorry for you. As people, we're fine being big, giving to little, but we lose our footing when we feel small being asked to contribute to big. That's where we lose our footing. That's why Jesus combined the Pharisees and the widow. That's why he did this in the Word, is that we understand half of it. We understand being big, giving to little, but we struggle with little, giving to big, and we justify pulling back from the concept of generosity because we go, well, we need it worse than they do. I already know where the enemy's going with this. How do I know that? People all over the world say the same thing. They don't even know each other. They don't even communicate. Because there's an enemy at play in this moment, in this aspect, in this juncture, in this joint of the church that says we were fine with giving. Religion is fine giving as long as it's smaller than the perceived giver. But what happens when a group of people start to make an impact and people start to be reached for the kingdom and things start to work well and we start to come together and actually accomplish what we set out to accomplish? Religion comes in and goes, whoa, that's enough. You need it worse than they do. That means it's not people that get offended. If it's always the same words, if it's always the same concept, it means the enemy is the most threatened when a group of people begin to give in the second half. Because that's where the work gets accomplished on a large scale. We accomplish on a large scale when we're willing to be small, giving to big. That is why it's always met with the most opposition. I'm tasked with understanding, like I have to be able to teach the why in the second season, and I haven't done it. I've pulled back from it. I'm afraid I'm going to get criticism. I'm afraid people are going to go, doesn't that seem like a little bit too nice of a truck for a preacher? It's super nice. Do you know the seats have air conditioners in them? And I just sit in my little bathroom eating ice cream like, well, I can't talk about it because we're doing pretty good. I guess we've done okay. I'll just be here. I've been weak. About it. Here's why. Because we're trained. We are trained to consider the role of the giver and the role of the receiver. And as long as the receiver is needy, we're good with it. Hold on. Here, stick with me. Please intellectually engage on this. Try to stick with me. Is that we always consider the giver and the receiver. And the problem is God is saying both are flawed. The giver is always flawed. The receiver is always flawed. And if you're always measuring, does the receiver need it worse than the giver, then we don't understand the nature of giving. And we individually slow down in our spiritual progress. please bear with me. Please bear with me. It's important that you understand where I'm going with this. Is that if we are always deciding, are we the giver or the receiver, no one is ever going to choose the role of the widow. You can say that you hate the Pharisees. You can say that you hate the powerful and the legalistic. You can say that all you want. But given the option of the two, you would always choose Pharisee over widow. Jesus is saying, here's the problem. It's not about the giver or the receiver. Jesus is saying, I've got good for you. I've got a plan for you, and I want into everything in your life. I want access to everything in your life. And the enemy goes, well, you need it worse than that. This stool is squeaking. John 12:24 says this. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground and dies. See, that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to give and have it die. We don't want to give to something untrustworthy. We don't want to give and give up control. We're fine with giving as long as we don't lose control of it, right? It says, unless the seed goes into the ground and dies. That's harsh language, but it's explaining the role between life and death. We have a lot of farmers in this area. We're actually getting more farmers. They just look a little different. Have you noticed? That's a weed joke. Anyway. We have a lot of farmers that understand this. We understand that if you have a seed, you don't eat it. You invest it. This is a farmer. Take Jesus out of this equation. If you have a seed, you invest it. And through that seed produces. And if you think, oh, great, here comes a sermon, give and it'll be given back. That is not what this is. We're not going to build a religion out of giving either. It says it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Now, here's the key word. The key word in that verse is produces, is the creator of the world. If we can look past the created things and get a glimpse of the creator, what he's saying to you is, I have a desire to produce through you. I want to produce through you for your family, for your kids, for your legacy, for the community. I want to use you to do amazing things. I want to produce through you, but production always has an element of death. See how bad we cheapen it when we're like, I'm not giving to that church. That church is doing too good. Well, do you want to give to a church that does terrible? Like if you show up year after year after year and it just gets worse and worse and worse, more legalistic, more crabby, more introverted, like it's not good soil. See, you pin yourself into a corner. Well, I don't want to give to that church. It's doing too well. What we're saying is it's good soil. It's a good place to learn how to give as God is dealing with you about giving. I'm excited about what we've accomplished. You know that 7 years ago, this was just a juniper patch and there was no such thing as Shiloh Ranch Cowboy Church? Look at what we've accomplished. We lose track of that. God's doing amazing things, but that's not what this sermon is about. Because that's placing focus on the receiver. Oh, I can feel it. Our spirits want to not like this. He says, I want to produce through you. I want to use you to do better. I want to use you to produce in your world, in your circle. And the problem is this, is that when you place your focus on the giver or the receiver, you never fully let go. Here's the challenge. I got told after the first service that I was encouraging people to commit a federal criminal act. So I'm going to have to Okay. Here's what I said in the first sermon. I'm not saying it this time in case you're back there watching. Anyway, if you want to measure the role that money plays in your life, but you cannot bring yourself to give anything to a church, maybe there's distrust, maybe there's been bad experiences, fine. This is about you. This is about you and Jesus. Take me completely out of it. I would be interested to see what your spirit would do. What would happen in your inmost being if you could convince yourself to go home and take a $20 bill and just light it on fire? Now, if you logically think about this, this is to no benefit to me. This is no benefit of the church. If this helps, if you're wondering, there are 7 people that oversee all the finances, and I'm not even a signer on the account. If you think that somehow this is me somehow baiting and switching, that somehow this is to my benefit, like, let's just get this off the table. If I'm telling you to go home and burn your money, how could I benefit from that? Be mad all you want, but logically, it can't be to my benefit. If you were to go home and light a $20 bill on fire and just watch it burn, then you are committing a criminal act. So definitely don't do it. But if you did, you're going to get a real measurement of the role that money plays in your life. See, Jesus knows this. Is the enemy will come in and go, you need that worse than the church does. I will submit to you that he's right. You need your money worse than we do if your money is where your production comes from. I don't think I've ever heard a preacher say that. But what Jesus is saying is it's got too much control. It's got too much control. You've got to acknowledge that there is a role that finances are playing in your life. It's got too much control. It costs you peace. It costs you your financial security. How much money is enough? You know, like all those rich people that we know, they're like, oh, I don't need any more. Jesus is addressing this concept that says generosity should follow those who follow Christ. And yet we, as a society, go, I'm not giving to that church. That church is doing too well. What we've proven is that we do good with what we've been given. If you want to predict what the church would do, hey, if the church had $10 million, which, I mean, if somebody feels compelled to write. The best prediction of what we would do in the future is what we've done in the past. Let me tell you what we're going to do here. Let me tell you what we're going to do, what we're always going to do. We're always going to make an effort to expand and reach the unchurched, reach people who hadn't found a home previously, introduce people to Jesus. We want to feed people. If you've been to church recently and be like, the music's too loud. I know. We have a building that we built because otherwise we were going to be in a tent. We were in a tent. And this is what we could afford. We would love to build a bigger building. We would love to make room for more people. Guess what? God has a plan to how to pay for it. And he put it in your pockets. Okay. That's I think that's the first time I've ever quoted Joel Osteen. If you're concerned about what we're doing, just know our desire is to do more of the same. That's what we want to do. We want to do more of the same. We don't need to move into a bigger building until we've moved into a bigger spiritual space in our own lives. Can I say that again? We don't need a bigger physical building until individually we begin to move into a bigger spiritual space that includes the concept of generosity. And if you can't go home and burn your money, because what's going to happen is if you burn a $20 bill, you'd be like, that was stupid. That was so dumb. That could have gone to a good cause. See how both parties win, the giver and the receiver, how they win when money doesn't get to be in control? Here's the other one. Well, that church doesn't need my money, so I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it to someone that needs it. You are thriving in the first half of generosity because you're giving to someone smaller than you. And you're getting the credit. Church doesn't get the credit for it. Jesus doesn't get the credit for it. You do. See how broken this concept is when we start to try to manage our own self and we're going to be in control. And Jesus is going like, you can be the Pharisee or you can be the widow. But the problem is both tweak our religious thing. Are you starting to understand why I said this will be some people's last week in church? Anyway. Okay, John 21:25. John, the beloved, who had just a deep personal relationship with Jesus. Jesus loved him. It says that Jesus just loved John. You go, doesn't Jesus love everybody? Yes, okay, but it says that he was John the beloved, and no one else got called the beloved. It wasn't like Judas the beloved. Anyway, he writes the whole book, tells the whole story of Jesus, but this is how he ends it. He ends it with this. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world could not have room for the books that would be written. John is talking about baptism. He's talking about the death of the old and the life that comes with the new. Have you guys ever seen a pasture or a field that a fire has gone across and how green it comes back after the fire? I think our danger is this, is that we've decided that we're doing good enough. And I think I've fallen into that. I'm afraid that what if people think we're doing too well? Well, what if people think I'm too comfortable? What if people think the church is too comfortable? And I have been the dam that stopped the water because in reality, God's going, we've got so much more to do. If we fall in love with Jesus, I promise you, giving is the easy part. Being generous, being a giver, being involved, we would love to see what Jesus would do with that. But the problem is when the focus goes to the giver or the receiver, the concept of Jesus gets lost. And John goes, I would have loved to have told you everything about Jesus, but the books in the world wouldn't contain it all. So where does it stop? If you're curious, because I think the easy functioning concept would be like, okay, when we were in Rimrock, we needed a building, and now we have one. We needed some property, now we have one. Like, okay, we did it. When do we reach that point? My wife and I talked about this. When do we reach that point where we say, okay, we've done enough? We're good, we'll stop. Here it is. If you're wondering where the church stops needing movement and needing forward growth, here I've thought about it. Here it is. When every sinner has heard the name of Jesus accurately proclaimed, we'll stop. We'll give up. We'll back. Okay, we did it. We rang the bell at the top of the mountain. But until then, we should desire to go further. We should desire to do more. You know what we would do with 10 million? The same thing we did with 6,000. So if you're wondering what we'll do with more, look at what we did with less. If you're wondering what you would do with more, look at what you're doing with now. Look at your past, and it can gauge your future. God is saying, I want into every aspect of your life. The culture of generosity needs to return. And if you're concerned that the church might be doing a little too well, I will no longer apologize for that. This is my line in the sand. I'm not going to apologize if the church seems like it's doing just a little too. That means we're good soil, and we're going to keep doing more. We're going to keep trying to reach more. We're going to keep loving people. We would love to build a bigger building. We would love to buy more land so that we can feed more people. We would love for people in the community to be able to put food on their plates. You know what I had a guy tell me? Well, you feeding all those people is just making them lazy. We're not even started yet, sucker. You just wait. Here's why. Which one of those kids chose those parents? I would love to make a bigger impact, but I don't care anything about making a bigger impact out there until I'm willing to be honest and see God make a bigger impact here. If you throw your hands up and walk out, I understand. I know this is difficult. But God's going to spark something in the lives of the people who stay of why am I not considering generosity of small giving to big? Why am I only willing to be big and give to little? It scratches an itch. It makes us feel good when we're big and give to little. It doesn't scratch a religious itch to be little and give too big. And I'm not saying everybody that got involved at Rimrock, that was the case at all. That's not what I'm saying. The people who gave from a religious place are not here anymore. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not even upset. But it doesn't scratch the religious itch to feel small and give to big. But what Jesus is saying is, I want to produce through you. That's why seeds are important. When we become so needy that we're eating the seeds that God's given us, we are robbing the opportunities to produce through our lives. We've got to update that. We've got to update our generosity, not to only be big and give to little, but also be willing to be little and give to big. Because if it was little, hey, think of this. If it started little and it went big, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a good thing that it's gone as well as it's gone. It's a good thing that we have honored the vision that God put in our lives in the beginning, and I will no longer stand in the way of a generosity culture in this group. Let's pray. God, give us clarity on this. Give us clarity that there are more people to be reached. There are more people that we have got to make an impact to. God, there's a world, a generation that's being raised. And God, our impact is not just for us, it's for those coming behind us. God, allow us to be people who produce a legacy, produce for our families, produce in our jobs. God, turn us into people who produce. Take away the desire that we're only willing to give from big to little, but we can also be people, God, who are little giving to big. Help us have a well-rounded concept of generosity. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.